Hi, my name is Gabby Sparks, and I am currently enrolled in the master's program for Curriculum and Instruction Teaching Technology, and I should be done with my master's program at the end of December if everything goes as planned. So as you can see here on my screen, I chose to do mine over third grade fluency, and that has been a passion of mine since I started teaching third grade. And for my history, I indicated that students in the third grade in our Southwest Iowa town are pretty significantly below grade level. They are really lacking the skills in fluency, and I think it really showed us a difference between our fluency scores before COVID and post-COVID, just because the group of students that we had this year were sent home when they were first graders, so they missed that whole fourth quarter of phonemic awareness and phonics. And then in second grade, they had masks trying to learn phonics through a mask. So we can definitely tell the difference in their fluency scores. So as I keep going through the history, I said that we have some problems with some district provided comprehension assessment scores, our fluency assessment scores, and that we use FastBridge learning and progress monitoring through that website. My problem statement is that there is a lack of information regarding the correlation between students using repeated readings with their success with reading fluency in the classroom. So my main goal from winter to spring was to do repeated readings. I would pick out 5 passages. They would read those 5 passages every day for 20 minutes. They started with me, whole group, and I practiced it with them. And then I eventually moved it over into partner work, where they had to work together and time each other, help each other with words that they were missing, and they had a sheet that they had to fill out along with it. I go on to talk about how we also have students who are not reading at home, and I know that was one of my concerns in my discussion post that I had made throughout this course, is that I was having some issues with reading at home due to extracurricular activities and lack of time. So I started sending home fluency passages to see if that would kind of help. The purpose of the study is to determine and fill the gap with fluency-geared intervention and see a growth in the students' reading fluency scores recorded in their words per minute. It will assess the words per minute from winter testing and then post-assess in the spring for my post-assessment. This is about a 2.5-month period of time, so they have a significant amount of time between the pre-test that I gave them and the post-test that they have in the spring. The passages are the same fall, winter, and spring. They do not change. They are at third grade benchmark level of where we expect them to be, and we just go off of their words per minute. They're actually given 3 passages. They get 1 minute per passage to read as much as they can, and then it takes a combined score and comes up with their words per minute. I talked about that the group of students that I had remained the same. It did not change. The intervention was explicitly taught and modeled first, as I kind of demonstrated or talked about earlier. They practiced the readings 4 to 5 times a week for 15 minutes each day. And my research question that I have for this is there a difference in the pre-winter 2021 to post-spring 2022 CBMR fluency rate of growth for third grade students after their horsepower intervention and FastBridge progress monitoring? So the students were placed in horsepower intervention groups to practice their fluency and receive intervention at their level for those 2.5 months between the testing. Pre-test scores compared to post-test scores do show a significant difference in growth. The two-tailed p-value is less than, sorry, this moved while I was talking. Nothing like technology messing up when you're trying to do it. It's less than 0.0001, and by conventional criteria, the difference is considered to be extremely statistically significant. And I do have a zoomed in version of my graph that I will show you now. I know that's kind of small on this one, so hopefully my screen transfers over to this. And I'll include this in my turn-in box also. So this is my fluency graph, and I have my pre-mean was 105.15 and my post-mean was 122.08. And the pre is blue, the post is red. You can see that when I performed the tests that we were trained to do in this course, my Cohen's D was 0.425938. So it's about a medium effect size. So it did have some growth in it from winter to spring, which was to be expected, that they would have some growth, maybe not substantially significant growth where I could determine that it was a for sure correct intervention to do, but it did show that the majority of the students, it did have a positive effect on them and that it was a medium effect size. Based on the data gathered, you can see that there was a change from winter to spring. And I found it really interesting when I went through and did some of these R scores, just how much different, like 58 to 88. So like there was a substantial amount of difference in my scores. Back onto my findings. The intervention was 5 days a week for 20 minutes, and each day they were more likely to have a higher reading fluency rate, or that's the goal, at least, that they would. And the data shows that the intervention allowed for student growth from winter to spring. So things were not changed in the middle of it. There were no differences. I mean, we did have to account for interruptions, such as like fire drills, stuff like that. But basically, what I'm trying to say is that the horsepower did make a difference for the 5 days, 15 to 20 minutes every day. My conclusion is there a difference in the fluency rate between the students who use the repeated reading 5 times a week from pre to post testing over the 2-month period of time? And it does indicate that, yes, it did make a difference. Now, there were some outliers that when I went through and I was doing their mean score and looking at the scores and comparing them, I did list on here that there were some outliers such as ESL students, ELL students, and my SPED students who were not expected or required based on their IEP to have the same amount of growth as my general education students. So for instance, if I had a general education student who was expected to make 20 words per minute growth from winter to spring, my SPED student might be only expected to have maybe 13 to 15 words per minute growth. So as long as they were meeting their growth goal, I counted that as a win, but I know that that did have an effect when I look at the graph and everything. So I did list that there were some outliers that could be potentially why maybe my score wasn't as high as what I had anticipated. And I go on to talk about, it does make a difference whether or not they're reading outside of school or not. And my further study could be narrowed down to meet the needs, specifically focusing on like phonemic awareness, multisyllabic words, and increasing their fluency rate. The limitations of this was that the study had quite a few. It was collected over a 2.5-month period of time, so it was a pretty long time in my opinion. I know some of the other studies that we looked at through this course were quite a bit shorter. And so I feel like there was a lot that could have happened in that time period. So I feel like that might have been a limitation for me. And the same results might not be present in larger urban school districts or grade levels. And since we use a district-wide intervention with multiple different resources and materials, it was a little bit like we were bombarding ourselves and the kids because they were kind of having a bunch of different things to choose from. And luckily, I was able to just choose one thing and stick with that one thing the whole time. But I will say, like, other classrooms had different materials and they would change materials frequently. So I feel like some limitations for people in the future might be that they need to pick one material and stick with that one material to make sure that it is working before they start changing the materials. Some questions for further study would be, is there a difference in scores of students who read at home with their parent or guardian compared to students who did not read at home? And the second one that I had would be, how does the intervention of repeated reading impact oral reading fluency rates in students who are reading below third grade level? So this would be my SPED students, my ESL, my ELL, and frankly, the class that I had this year coming in from second grade because they were behind. So I really did enjoy going through and looking at my resources and I referenced them throughout this. They were very interesting and easy to navigate. And I feel like just based on taking this course, I was able to come up with a lot of information about how I'm going to use my data in the future and how important it is to look at the pre and the post scores when making my lesson plans and coming up with interventions to benefit the students that also show growth in my teaching and how the growth is impacting the students.